In wrestling, strength doesn't just win you matches, it wins you enemies. And few men ever carried that truth on their shoulders like Ken Patera. He wasn't just another wrestler trying to make a name for himself. He was different. He had real credentials, real strength, and a story that felt larger than life. From the very beginning, Patera's career looked like it was going to be something unforgettable, but no one could have predicted just how much love, hate, and chaos would follow him. Ken's journey began in Portland, Oregon, in a Czech-American family where athletics were practically in his blood. As a kid, he wasn't the villain fans would later boo out of arenas. He was just a boy who loved sports. At first, track and field was his calling. He flew over hurdles, soared in the high jump, and looked like he could have been destined for Olympic stardom. But fate can be cruel. A high school ankle injury crushed those dreams and forced him to abandon the events he loved most. For many, that would have been the end of their athletic story. For Ken, it was just the beginning of another. At Brigham Young University, Patera shifted focus to throwing events like the shot put and discus. He quickly became one of the top throwers in the entire nation, but success didn't come easy. When he finished only 6th in the 1968 Olympic trials, disappointment hit him hard. To most, 6th place would have been a career highlight. To Ken, it felt like failure. That setback pushed him into making a life-changing decision. He walked away from throwing and poured every ounce of his being into Olympic weightlifting. That choice would transform him from a frustrated college athlete into one of the strongest men in the world. Between 1969 and 1972, Patera rewrote American weightlifting history. He captured 4 straight national titles, a Pan American gold medal, and a silver at the World Championships. Even more impressive, he became the first American to clean and jerk over 500 pounds, a staggering feat of power that left crowds gasping in disbelief. To this day, few can even imagine such strength, but Ken didn't just do it once. He did it in front of the world, proving he wasn't a gimmick. He was the real deal. When the 1972 Munich Olympics arrived, many believed Ken Patera was destined to bring home a medal. He was America's hope, a man built like a machine, ready to conquer the world stage. But once again, fate had other plans. A lingering knee problem, combined with the controversial removal of the clean and press lift from Olympic competition, shattered his chances. His Olympic dream slipped away in an instant. For most athletes, that kind of heartbreak would have been the end. For Patera, it was the spark that lit the fire of something even bigger: professional wrestling. By 1973, Ken traded the Olympic platform for the squared circle. Fans didn't know what to make of him at first. Was he an athlete, a showman, or something in between? In truth, he was all three. His real strength gave him a legitimacy that most wrestlers could only dream of. When promoters billed him as wrestling's strongest man, it wasn't just hype. He had the medals, the records, and the scars to prove it. But wrestling is about more than raw strength. It's about personality, storytelling, and capturing the crowd. And this is where Ken began to evolve. In 1975, when Patera showed up in Jim Crockett Promotions, he wasn't the bleach blonde villain fans would later despise. He was a polite, soft-spoken babyface, the Olympic hero with a humble smile. Crowds respected him, cheered him, and saw him as someone who represented American grit and determination. His first major feud was with Johnny the Champ Valentine, the United States heavyweight champion. Valentine had a weekly $2,000 silver challenge, drawing names from a fishbowl to give fans a chance at seeing him defend his title. But he never wanted to pull Patera's name, because he knew the risk. One night, Ken made a bold move that showed the clever side of his personality. During a commercial break, he secretly replaced every slip of paper in the bowl with his own name. When Valentine reached in and pulled out Ken Patera live on television, his face turned red with rage. Fans erupted with laughter and cheers. It was a stroke of brilliance. Patera wasn't just strong, he was smart, too. Their matches that followed were hard-hitting, with Ken using crushing bear hugs and suffocating headlocks that looked like they could snap Valentine in two. Even when Valentine managed to escape with victories, he left battered and broken. That feud established Ken as more than just a sideshow of strength. He had arrived as a serious singles competitor who could headline shows and make fans believe every move he delivered. Yet, behind that polite smile, a darker side was growing. By 1977, that mean streak had taken over completely. The humble Olympic hero was gone. In his place stood an arrogant villain, his hair bleached blonde, his promos dripping with ego. He bragged about his strength, cheated in matches, and showed no respect for the fans who once cheered him. He introduced brutal new moves like the swinging neckbreaker and his devastating full Nelson, even breaking another wrestler's neck in a storyline that left audiences horrified. This transformation wasn't just a gimmick, it was a rebirth. Wrestling magazines and promoters quickly took notice. Pro Wrestling Illustrated named him the most hated wrestler of the year in 1977. And while fans despised him, arenas sold out to see him get beaten. Patera had mastered the art of being the villain, but his greatest test was still to come. Because looming on the horizon was the man who defined professional wrestling for an entire generation, Bruno Sammartino. Their collision course wasn't just about titles, it was about values, pride, and the battle between good and evil that would ignite Madison Square Garden like never before. By the late 1970s, Ken Patera had perfected the art of being hated. The bleach blonde hair, the arrogance, the cruel tactics, it all made him stand out in an era where fans craved heroes and despised villains. And when you're the strongest man in wrestling, people don't just boo you because you're arrogant. They boo you because deep down, they believe you might actually win. That was the danger of Ken Patera. He was too real, too believable, and that's exactly what made his next feud so explosive. His opponent was none other than Bruno Sammartino, the living legend of the WWF. Bruno wasn't just a champion, he was the symbol of hard work, respect, and dignity. For over a decade, he had carried the company on his shoulders, selling out Madison Square Garden time after time. To fans, Bruno wasn't just a wrestler, he was family. So when Ken Patera set his sights on him, it wasn't just another heel challenging the hero. It was the nightmare scenario. A ruthless powerhouse with Olympic credentials threatening to destroy the very man fans had built into an icon. Their first encounters were electric. Crowds filled the garden, their voices shaking the rafters as they watched strength collide with resilience. Bruno represented pride, Patera represented ego. Bruno fought for respect, Patera fought for cruelty. Every time they locked up, it felt like the unstoppable force had finally met the immovable object. Fans didn't just watch these matches, they lived them. The fear in the arena was real. Because unlike other villains, Patera wasn't some cartoon character. He had the raw power to beat Bruno clean, and that made people nervous. The matches themselves were brutal. Patera's bear hugs crushed the air out of Sammartino. His full Nelson looked like it could snap the champion's neck. And yet, Bruno refused to give up. That defiance only fueled the crowd's hatred for Patera. Every cheer for Bruno was matched by jeers for Ken. And that's exactly what promoters wanted. Chaos, noise, emotion. Their rivalry became one of the hottest tickets in the business, proof that Patera had reached the very top of wrestling's villain mountain. But as the dust settled from his battles with Bruno, another challenge emerged, one that would define the next phase of his career. His name was Bob Backlund, a clean-cut, technical wrestler who had just begun his run as WWF champion. Backlund was everything Patera wasn't: polite, soft-spoken, and pure wrestling skill. He didn't rely on brute strength or dirty tactics. Instead, he wrestled with precision and technique. To fans, he was the underdog everyman they wanted to succeed. And to Patera, he was the perfect target. Their feud didn't just last a few months. It raged on for years, stretching from 1978 to 1981. They wrestled everywhere, from small towns to major arenas, sometimes facing each other more than 30 times in a single year. That's how hot their rivalry was. Fans couldn't get enough of watching Backlund try to out-wrestle the brute strength of Patera. And the matches weren't just competitive, they were violent, psychological wars where both men bled, struggled, and left the crowd on the edge of their seats. The most famous battle came in May of 1980 at Madison Square Garden, a Texas death match. This wasn't the clean, family-friendly style fans were used to. This was chaos. Steel chairs flew, blood poured, and the ring looked more like a crime scene than a wrestling arena. Patera came out swinging, using every ounce of strength to brutalize Backlund. But Backlund dug deep, his fiery comeback igniting the crowd like gasoline on fire. When Backlund finally overcame Patera's brute force to win, the arena erupted. It wasn't just about the victory, it was about proving that heart and skill could overcome cruelty and strength. The match was named Match of the Year, cementing both men's legacies. By now, Ken Patera wasn't just a villain, he was a phenomenon. He made fans pay to see him lose. He made heroes look like superheroes by being the monster they had to conquer. And just when people thought they'd seen the peak of his career, he entered another rivalry that pushed him into an entirely new spotlight. This time, it was against a man who would go on to become the face of wrestling worldwide, Hulk Hogan. In the early 1980s, Hogan wasn't yet the global superstar of WWF, but in the AWA, he was already a massive attraction. Fans adored him. He was larger than life, charismatic, and destined for greatness. So when Bobby the Brain Heenan paired Patera with his infamous Heenan family, Hogan became the prime target. For Patera, it was perfect. If you wanted to stay on top, you went after the rising star, and no star shined brighter than Hogan. They battled all across the country, sometimes as many as 200 times. Every territory wanted Hogan versus Patera. Fans packed arenas just to see their clash of titans. Hogan was the crowd's hero, the man with charisma and strength who represented hope. Patera was the merciless villain, using every trick in the book to tear him down. Their wars weren't just matches, they were spectacles that told a story of good versus evil, future versus past, hope versus cruelty. And in those moments, Patera proved again that he was one of the greatest villains wrestling had ever seen. But just as Patera's career seemed unstoppable, real life delivered a blow that no scripted storyline could match. In 1984, after a violent late-night incident outside a McDonald's in Wisconsin, Patera and fellow wrestler Masa Saito found themselves behind bars. What followed wasn't just another feud, it was the collapse of everything Patera had built. His wrestling career, once on fire, was suddenly frozen in place. April 6, 1984, Waukesha, Wisconsin. What started as a simple late-night food run turned into the most infamous night of Ken Patera's life. Along with fellow wrestler Masa Saito, he tried to get food from a McDonald's after hours. The restaurant was closed, and what happened next has been debated for decades. The story that spread was explosive. An enraged Patera hurled a heavy rock through the window in frustration. Patera denied it, but the damage was done. Police arrived at the hotel later that night, and what followed wasn't a wrestling brawl. It was a real fight. Officers clashed with the two wrestlers, and when the smoke cleared, both men were arrested. The headlines were brutal. The man once billed as wrestling's strongest was suddenly a criminal facing serious charges. Wrestling fans were stunned, and promoters had no choice but to cut ties. Court proceedings dragged on, but in the end, the verdict was clear. Patera and Saito were sentenced to 2 years in prison. Just like that, Ken's career was stopped dead. One day, he was battling Hulk Hogan in packed arenas. The next, he was locked behind bars, his reputation shattered, his momentum destroyed. For a wrestler, time is everything. Every year spent out of the spotlight is a year fans forget your name. But prison did more than pause Patera's career. It broke his body. By the time he was released early for good behavior in 1987, the unstoppable powerhouse had lost his conditioning. His legendary stamina and physique had faded. And yet, wrestling has a way of turning tragedy into opportunity. When WWF brought him back, they didn't ignore his prison past. They leaned into it. This time, Patera returned as a babyface. He cut heartfelt promos about how Bobby Heenan and his Heenan family had abandoned him during his darkest days. The storyline blurred the lines between reality and fiction, and fans believed it because the pain was real. For the first time in years, they weren't just booing Ken, they were sympathizing with him. The once hated villain now stood as a man seeking redemption, a fighter who had fallen but wanted one more shot at glory. At first, the comeback looked promising. Fans were curious, the story was powerful, but in the ring, reality told a harsher tale. The same man who once dominated legends was now struggling to keep up. He grew winded quickly. His movements were slower, The conditioning that had once made him a monster heel was gone. To protect him, WWF often placed him in tag matches, but fans could see the difference. The aura of invincibility was slipping away. And that's what made his return oddly compelling. On screen, Patera fought the Heenan family, battling the very man who had once made him a star. Off-screen, he fought against his own body, desperately trying to reclaim what prison had stolen from him. Fans weren't just watching a storyline, they were watching a man wrestle with time, age, and regret. It wasn't the triumphant comeback he dreamed of, but it was undeniably real. By the late 1980s, Ken Patera's run at the top was finished. He never returned to main event status, never recaptured the same aura of fear he carried in the late 70s and early 80s. But that doesn't mean his story faded. Quite the opposite. To this day, people still talk about him, not just for his titles or matches, but for the unique blend of real strength, real arrogance, and real consequences that defined his career. In the ring, he was the ultimate villain. He made Bruno Sammartino fight like a desperate hero. He made Bob Backlund look like an indestructible champion. He pushed Hulk Hogan before Hulkamania took over the world. And yet, behind the curtain, many of those same men respected him deeply. Bruno praised him. Hogan said they sold out arenas together more than 200 times. What looked like hatred on TV was, in reality, trust between professionals who knew they were making history together. Ken Patera's legacy is complicated. He was an Olympic athlete who became one of wrestling's greatest villains. He was a legitimate strongman who blurred the line between reality and performance. But he was also a man whose personal choices cut his prime short. His story is a mix of highs and lows, triumph and tragedy, strength and flaws. In the end, he proved that sometimes your biggest rival isn't the man across the ring, it's yourself. And maybe that's why fans still debate his career today. Was Ken Patera one of the greatest heels of all time, or a cautionary tale about wasted potential? Did prison ruin his legacy, or did it add another layer to his story? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But here's the real question. If Ken Patera had never walked into that McDonald's that night in 1984, how different would wrestling history look today?